Welcome to the Catering Feed, the Catering Growth Podcast, a show about growing your catering business and restaurant industry trends, powered by ezCater. Hi, Catering Feed listeners. This is Genevieve Babineau, your host, and I am so excited to bring our guest to you today. Her name is Tina McDonough. She's the Partner Marketing Manager at ezCater. She's had a really incredible marketing career working for some really wonderful brands, starting with Papagino's and D'Angelo. She worked for Disney, Coca-Cola, and Tina is really passionate about the power of bringing data to our partners and letting these industry leaders understand the opportunity and see where they should be playing. So Tina, we are so happy to have you here today.
Thanks for having me in the studio. I'm excited to be here.
I feel lucky that I've been able to have some great brands as part of my career path, from Disney and locally Papagino's and D'Angelo, and most recently the Coca-Cola Company. And what I'm really passionate about is that I've had this experience in some B2B and B2C roles, really using data to be able to make strategic decisions that can help brands grow their business. Data on its own doesn't do anything, but using it to understand where the opportunity is everything. So I'm really glad that we're able to start to look at that data and share that out.
So that's exactly what we're doing today, Catering Feed listeners. We are bringing you the results from the commission report that we did with Technomic, and we are so excited to dive into a whole episode on data. So before we get started today, as always, we love to dig into the news. TDN2K recently published an article talking about restaurant performance and how it really hit a wall in July, and it seems like both sales and traffic took another hit during that month. Same-store sales growth dropped 1% from June, and the traffic was declining to 0.8% from the previous month.
July tends to be a tough month for some restaurants, and for us, when we look at seasonality and B2B catering, we don't see that much of a decline month to month, but 4th of July happens and we see a really big dip that week. So this seems to make sense to me based on what we see in our data.
It's really interesting, too, because this time of year we keep hearing a lot of brands asking us about how do I grow more sales, right? They're thinking about how catering has lulled over the summer. To-go sales, even inside the four walls, clearly is trending in a tough direction. But I think a lot of great opportunity is just around the corner. And I used to always get really excited this time of year because you've got back to school, which has incredible opportunities to connect with that local community. You've got big B2B opportunities. As Q3 comes to an end, people start ramping up with their clients. You've got the holidays just around the corner. And we know that a lot of folks inside office buildings have been on vacation all summer. So hopefully these restaurants are going to see a bit of an uptick as that traffic starts to come in more and they have more opportunity with off-premises.
Yeah, it seemed like there were just a little over half of the markets that had seen a negative decline compared to some that had a positive growth. So I think those that have set themselves up for success are going to take advantage of all of the things that you just mentioned to make sure they end out the year really strong.
It is interesting. The very end of the article talked about the successful brands that saw this coming, that were proactively investing, whether it's in labor or sales opportunities or more ways to drive guest counts, that TDN2K is really saying that those are the ones that are going to do well in Q3 and Q4 and are going to be able to move past this and still finish the year strong. We often talk to brands when they're in varying levels of their catering journey, and one of the terms that we use here is clarifying the opportunity, because every single brand is unique. We know across the board that catering customer is really unique, and so there's not one specific silver bullet for how a brand should enter the industry, who they should target their audience to, and where they should play. So it's really crucial to understand the demands of the greater market to know where your brand can best succeed.
Yeah, brands need data to succeed, and we need data to succeed. We need to know what our restaurant partners are thinking about the opportunity so we can build the best products and programs to help them grow their catering business. So what we did on our team in leading up to our Cater Up conference in April was partner with our friends at Technomic to put together a survey to ask all of the questions about the catering industry and what our partners are thinking about it. So with Technomic, we surveyed more than 500 restaurant leaders that really represented more than 45,000 locations across the United States to get a gut check on what they were thinking about the catering opportunity.
And we're really excited about this because we are both total data junkies, and we want to break this down for everybody, and we promise you we're going to make a data podcast be as exciting and dynamic as possible.
Yeah, let's get into it. So part of our goal goal of the survey was to really understand the size and the scope of the opportunity. We want to know where catering, and specifically off-premises catering, fits into the overall industry. We are in a very big industry. I think the 2018 numbers of total restaurant food and beverage sales in the U.S. made up of $603 billion. Yes, billion.
That is a massive number. And I think also it's really interesting because then we break that down even further and talk about off-premises catering. And just to be really clear here, when we're talking about off-premises, we're not counting banquet halls or wedding or those special event venues. Just off-premises catering is $60 billion. So that's almost essentially 10% of their overall restaurant food and beverage size.
Yeah, and that's just the size. What's even more important is if you look at the growth numbers of the industry. We just talked about the TDN2K article. There's traffic declines, and this has been happening year over year. So when we look at the total industry overall sales growth for 2018, the final numbers netted out around 3.6% growth of overall industry. But what gets me excited about what we do every day is that catering is growing at 6%. So catering opportunity is about 50% faster than the overall restaurant industry.
So again, it's a small percentage of a brand's overall sales, but man, it's packing a punch and seeing some pretty intense growth.
Yeah, we asked our operators in the survey, on average, what percent of their sales they thought catering was. And on average, they were saying 18% of their sales was catering. Now, this could be B2B catering, B2C catering, but they thought it was 18% of their business.
Which is also a strikingly high number.
18% really seems like an aspirational number to me, and I think that's because catering could mean something different to any restaurant. There is a lack of an industry standard in this area, and when a consumer thinks of catering, they may think of a B2C formal event versus a business occasion.
It's funny because as a customer and consumer, I always thought of catering being associated with a wedding in the banquet hall or special events or, someone's 50th anniversary. And it wasn't until I was in the industry that I started really thinking of catering in terms of B2B and what that could do for food at work.
Yeah, that was one of the questions we asked our survey respondents to really understand what percent of their catering sales were coming from a B2B use case or a B2C use case, because we know there are really different opportunities in each of them. So from our survey, we found that 61% of respondents said that their catering business was coming from B2B, so 61%.
That's high.
Yeah, and what I think is interesting is when you break that down between the size of the operator, brands with 75 plus locations, that number gets even higher to 65% of their catering sales.
The thing with B2B is that just one B2B contact can really generate tens of thousands of sales and revenue every year, and that steady stream of business. And I think as brands and restaurant leaders are really thinking about whether to go after B2B or B2C, it's an entirely different list of capabilities, of resources, of infrastructure to be able to pull off either one of those. And the thing about B2B is you get to know that one person, they might order multiple times a week and come back to you again and again and again. And so there's far more sustainable traffic with that B2B decision maker.
Yeah, and depending on where you are in your trade market, both are going to be part of your business. You just have to decide which one you're going to focus on at which time.
And we see a lot of our partners also going after B2B versus B2C very differently, whether they're using a third-party marketplace, whether they have a tenured sales team that's doing outbound calls, or whether they're doing local restaurant marketing. It's really interesting to see once you've clarified your opportunity and you see where you want to play, that you're going to go after those different areas of the market in a very different way.
We know there's an opportunity in catering, so what we wanted to gather was how important catering was to an organization's overall success strategy. Are they building strategic plans against this great opportunity that we've just discussed? And 90% said it was important to grow their business. I don't think that's surprising at all. Everybody has been talking about off-premises, talking about how it's a bright spot in the industry. It's one of the fastest ways to grow, and truthfully, everybody wants a piece of it.
90% is a really great number, and I think while it's a large number for any group of respondents to be that overwhelmingly in the same camp is a little bit of a surprise, but then again, we know those industry norms that we were talking about earlier. Traffic is flat across all segments, even fast casual, and we're in an incredibly competitive environment. And so as both brands and independent operators are looking for those ways to increase same-stores growth and generate that incremental revenue, catering really is a phenomenal conduit, and it's presenting a great opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think despite the size of the opportunity and that 90% of people that responded to the survey said it was important for their success and that it's growing at 50% faster than the overall industry, what I found very interesting from the survey is that 70% of restaurants responded that their catering sales were flat, and that it's not getting a better outlook for next year as well.
I really need to unpack this one because this is where you start to scratch your head a little bit, that we see this as a huge opportunity in the industry. We see that this is growing year over year. Leaders are telling us, 90% of them, that this is incredibly important, and yet the projections and their perception of growth isn't really aligning.
So last year, 22% said they saw an increase in 1 to 10% of their catering sales. So that's really a win. It's important to think about what we call success and growth here. So even though 70% are seeing catering as flat, if your catering business is growing at all, that's going to be great for your revenue, and there's got to be some information we can take from that.
Even 1% for your business can be an incredible year-over-year growth. And then you look, 6% of the survey respondents saw over 10% of growth, which is a huge number. And I think any listener out there would be happy to hear that they had the opportunity for 10% growth.
So we know that to capture the growth and get that share of stomach, you need to differentiate. And we asked respondents, does their investment in catering match that they said it was important? So 90% said it's important. What are they doing to show that importance in their budgeting? And what I thought was really interesting is that 28% of survey respondents said that they have not made any investment into their catering program. And when you look at those really large brands that have 75 to 49 locations, it jumps to 41%. So I think you always say you have to spend money to make money. So it's amazing that there's this huge growth opportunity, and yet it's not matching either a resource investment in any way for these brands to a certain degree.
And the industry went through this shift where, it used to be that you could just open your four walls, you'd open those doors and traffic would come in. And I think people are really seeing that those days are done, and you have to think creatively about technology, creatively about sales and marketing, and how do you bring people to your brand. So it does beg the question, is there a similar phenomenon happening here with catering, that people see the growth, they see the opportunity, they see that it's important, but they're a little afraid to make that leap to truly invest in it?
Yeah, and organic growth is so hard to do, and you really have to find, in looking at the data and looking at your opportunity, what are the ways you could potentially have some quick wins so that you can survive and that you can grow out there.
There is a stark difference, though, between the folks that have smaller units versus that 75 to 249 locations. That 41% number, that 41% of those larger brands haven't made the investment to match the importance of catering is really interesting. And I think, I start to think about a lot of the industry trends. And in this current environment, those restaurant leaders, they're focused on labor, technology, third-party delivery. There are so many things right now that are consuming the time of these restaurant leaders. And I think when you're thinking about making an investment into an area of your business that has a smaller percentage but a higher impact, it's a really tricky thing to try to get that many people on board. And so I think we see with some of these smaller brands, they're maybe a little more agile, a little more nimble, and they can make that quicker decision to say, this is where the industry is going, and so we're going to quickly pivot to throw our money in that direction.
Absolutely. I know even in my experience when we were thinking about catering programs, it would take 12 to 18 months to make any type of change as simple as a menu or pricing, right? You almost have analysis paralysis sometimes when looking at the opportunity. And the first thing is always, have the catering menu out in the restaurant, and you start to just let people know that it's there. And so your takeout occasion or delivery occasion knows that they can come back in for catering, but that's your current guest. How do you start to reach new guests and let them know about your catering program? And it's difficult to do. It does require
require some kind of investment, even if it's just resources of people, right? Just understanding that someone is dedicated to thinking about catering, not necessarily a multi-million-dollar advertising budget against it.
But there are those brands that, again, see the opportunity, see the role in the greater industry, see the growth, and they're making that investment.
Well, Genevieve, that's exactly it, right? So of the 35% of respondents that said they were growing and that their catering sales were increasing, no surprise here, 91% said they were investing in their catering program. You have to spend money to make money sometimes. And clearly they're seeing a positive ROI to some degree because they are seeing that sales growth. And to the point of the brands being able to be agile, of that group that is growing, 64% of those were truly independent operators, right? So owners that have 1 to 7 locations, they're the ones who are making the investment and seeing that positive catering growth.
So it's these brands who have identified the trends over the past, 5-10 years in the industry, seen what an opportunity catering can be, and they're the ones who are winning, and it's because of the investment they've made. I think we can draw a pretty clear correlation between that investment and their growth.
When we look at the top areas that operators are investing in, I think it's no surprise you've talked about a lot of these on the podcast already. So 34% are investing in people. Then you have 25% that are investing in technology. How can they be more efficient and automate more processes when it comes to catering? Then we have 24% that are investing in marketing. How do you drive demand and get people in the door? And what's really interesting about the people investment is that 32% are actually hiring in a sales function. So it's a little bit chicken or the egg, right? You have to balance it out. You have to drive the demand, but then you have to have the right processes and efficiencies in place to be able to execute it when all those guests come in.
One of the other stats that really jumped out to me is that 29% said that they're hiring more operations staff, and also 29% said that they invested in better training. And this really ties back to our podcast with Chaz, because there's such a crucial importance to not just hire right and invest in your people, but make sure that you're training right. Because at the end of the day with catering, you don't have multiple checkpoints to either have an opportunity for guest recovery or really wowing that guest. And so you've got to hire people, but also really set them up for success. So I thought it was really interesting to see how people are making that people investment in different ways.
Yeah, I loved the Chaz podcast. And when you see that 2% are hiring delivery drivers, it shows that people are shifting to third party for delivery execution. And when I think back to everything that Chaz was saying about the hospitality and those crucial moments, you can see that delivery is really an area where people are outsourcing versus bringing that in-house.
And they're also demanding a higher expectation of whoever that third-party partner is to say, we can't control this experience necessarily from start to finish, so how do we make sure we feel safe when we're putting it in your hands?
So technology was the area where a lot of respondents said they were looking into investing, which I think is great. We could talk about technology all day long. And 42% said they were going to invest in online ordering. And what I think is really interesting about that is that consumers in their demand for ordering online actually increased 26% when we look at kind of year-over-year changes. So it's great to see that restaurants realize that there's an importance in having an online ordering platform for catering because the guests are demanding it.
This is something that I feel like I can get on my own personal soapbox about because I'm a conflicted consumer. On the one hand, I want all the information to be right there. I don't want to have to fill out a form. I don't want to have to sit on hold and wait. So I want that great digital experience, but sometimes I also want to talk to a human. And so I think these restaurants are trying to figure out how do you meet both those needs, but it's really a baseline expectation now that you have a pretty polished digital experience.
It's a piece of your reputation, right? There's an expectation behind it. And even if you think of a consumer catering experience where we know there are many of those throughout the year,
I'm never going to order food from a place if I can't see your menu online. And like you, I want that experience. I want to know that you're going to cater to my every whim, but I want to know what we're starting with in terms of packages and offerings so I know if I should continue my time investment in working with you.
And we hear a lot of our customers talk about it's 2019, that if they don't see that website is developed out or they don't have the ability for online ordering, it kind of makes them start to question other aspects of the brand. And what other aspects of the brand are you not investing in? It makes me question whether I'm making the right decision.
Absolutely. And consumer trends are changing. And we know that if you're not investing in your digital presence, in your packaging, all of those consumer touch points are so important. But it really starts online. We spend more times on our phones and our computers than in any other place. So we have to make sure that you're capturing the consumer where they are in their moment of intent. And we talk about this all the time. The more friction you have in between them being introduced to your catering offering to when they make that final purchase, you're going to have a lower conversion if there's a lot of friction. So how can we get them with the information they need when they want it so they can make that purchase?
Absolutely. Conversion is king. And I think as I look through all of this data and hear your insights, there are 4 things that really come through pretty clearly for me. Catering is a huge opportunity. We're looking at a $60 billion piece of the pie, and it's experiencing 6% growth. 2, we're hearing that 90% of these respondents think of it as strategically important. So that's really the consensus across the industry. 3, 28% of brands haven't made any investment yet, so there's a disconnect from the first 2 points and whether we're actually taking any action about it. And yet 91% of brands who are growing did make an investment. And to me, that's the piece that it's like, if you want a piece of this pie and you really want to succeed in this industry, you've got to make that commitment and you have to put your investment and resources towards it.
What we want to do is try to help give you the right resources to be able to capture a little bit of that growth. And again, these investments don't have to be financial, but who's that person on your team who can start to dedicate even a small part of their time to thinking about what are the ways you can grow your catering opportunity in your trade area? All of the data we just discussed can be found at cateringdata.com. We want to be able to provide the resources that you need to grow your catering business, and we know there's no silver bullet, but we just want to help give you the information and inform you so you can make the best decisions that are going to grow your business.
Well, Tina, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It was really helpful for you to walk us through this data and see how it's affected by other trends in the industry.
Thanks for having me. This was so much fun, and I know we could talk about data all day long, so we'll save more for another time.
So Catering Feed listeners, as Tina said, go to cateringdata.com, download that industry report, and you can hear more insights from Tina and the team. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for listening to the Catering Feed, powered by ezCater.